Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 6 p.m. It is October 4th, 22. We're meeting in the lower theater. There is a Zoom link and a phone link available on the agenda if you look on town website. That being said, I'd like to call this meeting to order. First order of business is to approve the amended minutes of September 20, 2022. We hear a motion.
I move that we approve the minutes of September 20th, 2022.
Second. Made and seconded to adopt the amended minutes of September 20th, 2022. Any other further corrections, additions, or comments? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are adopted. Additions to the agenda for routine administrative matters and/or pressing matters that will require ratification in the future meeting. I have none. Scott?
No, nothing to add.
Board?
Nope.
Moving right along to public comment on items not on the agenda, 3 minutes per person. Yes, Betsy.
Betsy Thurston, I just want to comment on the swap shop things.
That's an item on the agenda.
Right, but we don't usually comment on those items, do we?
Well, you should save your comment for the.
Yeah, can I?
Okay,
Okay, I will.
Part of the
Thank
public.
Anyone else? Right, let's go to the manager's report.
Thank you, Peter. Just a couple of quick items. There'll be a public hearing coming up with Wyndham Regional on October the 13th. And the thing that's important to us is they want to change their bylaws to authorize them to do intermunicipal agreements. So there's an opportunity for them to provide more municipal services through intermunicipal agreements. Right now, based on their bylaws, they can't do that. So there's no action that we need necessarily. If you're interested, there's a Zoom link and it's part of their regular business. They'll then vote on that, I think, by the end of October. And hopefully that amendment will go through and they'll be able to help coordinate larger scale municipal services, which will benefit all of us if we can come up with ways to economize and also look at options for planning and other types of things that they might be able to assist us beyond what they already do. So it's coming up, and the regional has been a good partner on a lot of aspects of this. So this is actually something that will benefit us in the long run. The solid waste management district is just making some changes as well to their district agreements and changing their bylaws as well to incorporate some additional responsibilities for the treasurer in the district. Again, that's something that comes through our quarterly meetings, and there'll be a vote on that coming up at the end of October. Nothing that'll dramatically impact anything that happens here with folks here, just informational so that people know what's happening with some of our other partners that provide services to us. Those are the primary things for now. And
Board, Brett.
So October 1st has passed and the Cannabis Control Board haven't reviewed any applications yet. I'm eager to hear what's happening on that score.
And we have a couple of things that are still going through zoning and land use, and then eventually they'll have to come back to us to ask for a local license. So I did go back. Remember, we had looked at the link on the one local application, and then they took that link down, so they're not using it. So I'm wondering if they were asked to do that by the control board, and then they were going to come up with a new form. I've not seen anything. I've been checking the website periodically.
So we do have applicants, though. We have at least.
Well, we have two that are potentially looking at locations that have to get through zoning, and then they'll be coming through with a request for a local cannabis control.
And will you warn that?
Yes.
On the website and everything?
Yep.
Okay.
So at the earliest, it won't be any time until sometime in November, depending upon how they get through with the land use issues.
Okay.
Yep.
Anyone else? Seeing none, let's move on to the agenda. Presentation to support Vermont Trans Environmental Mitigation Grant Application.
So I've got Andres here from our consulting company, and I provided some of the background information. I'll just give a little bit verbally, and then I'm going to turn over the presentation to Andres so he can jump into this in more detail. This started, if you guys remember, with our EWP project, and we looked at some of the damages that were occurring around Sonex, and that led into a larger field investigation as to what are some of the sources of the stormwater, because we're getting rapid erosion and around the gullies around all of our industrial sort of park area there. So we did hire Andres and his firm. They went out, did a hosted field investigation, came up with a drainage map, which I attached copies to. And then as we got into this further, we were having more and more challenges in terms of trying to manage the stormwater as it was impacting Spencer Drive, as it was impacting the railroad. If you remember, during the July storms, the railroad had an 800-yard washout of part of the tracks. And it's turned out that part of that came through the Spencer Drive problem area. And then I had Gary go out and take dramatic pictures of some of the washout that's occurred since those pictures have gotten, really, the amount of damage has occurred pretty significantly since the July storms. So, Gary standing there was really just sort of showing you how quickly some of this erosion is occurring in some of these gullies and some of these ravine areas. So with that as a little background, we were working with Andres and his team, and he's going to give you some more detail as to what's going to go into this grant application. And then we've got other steps in the future as to how we might want to pull all of the neighbors in for part of the conversation about if we're successful in the grant, how we might want to fund the local share that comes out of this grant. So, all right, Andre, if you give me a minute, I'm going to share my screen with you.
Sounds good.
I just got to see if I can do that here. I did this the last time. So I should be able to make you the host. I'm not sure why I can't do that. Hold on. All right, Gary, do you remember the last time we did this?
Yeah.
Oh, it was under here.
There was an option to make all participants hosts. There's only 4 people.
Yeah, and you,
I just do Andre under there.
yeah, and then the 3 dots.
That's what it was. Yep. I'm gonna make him the host. All right, Andre. I think you're
Recording stopped.
okay. All set.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for having me. My name's Andres Turizo with Watershed Consulting. So I would just like to give you just a general kind of overview of the project that we're working on, and then introduce you to the grant and kind of the preliminary cost estimate that we put together for this project. So the map that I'm sharing right now, I don't really expect you to be able to see the details because I know that there's a lot of busy colors and lines on the map. But I just kind of wanted to set the stage and just let you know that all of the areas here depicted in the colors are areas that we've been assessing for stormwater runoff as part of this project. So we're really just taking a comprehensive look at the whole area here. And analyzing the peak flows and the really getting to, what are the best solutions to mitigate the drainage issues that exist. And specifically, we're really looking at, if you can see my cursor here, we're really looking at the northern, we're calling the northern gully here. So this is Chroma facility. So this line right here in aqua, this is the kind of the northern gully that we're looking at And then the southern gully off of Spencer Lane is located down here, surrounded by the purple area. So these are really the two gullies where there's been substantial erosion and sedimentation down below along the railroad tracks. So what we're working on currently is coming up with design solutions to mitigate that the stormwater flows to each one of those gullies. So we've done runoff modeling and we've done some preliminary cost estimating, and I'm going to share that. But first, kind of just to show a little bit of detail in terms of what the design information that we've put together so far. So this is the northern gully. So we're talking the Chroma facility is just off the right side of the map right here. This is Route 5. And so the one project that we've designed conceptually so far is indicated right here in the middle, and it's these blue this blue rectangle right here, and then this blue pond area right here. It's actually an infiltration type basin. These lines right up here, these are underground chamber systems. So this is called a Storm Tech chamber system. And I can just show you we have several more on the Spencer Drive side too. So just to show kind of an example, this is from a project that we completed a few years ago in Northfield, Vermont. So this is the type of system that we're talking about. It's an underground system. Once it's buried, it functions very much like a leach field. Essentially just takes all the stormwater, infiltrates the stormwater down underground. Once these are done, basically this gets filled up on top, and then the site is restored. So the site can still functions, can still be totally usable, but all the stormwater mitigation occurs underground. And so that's what's represented here in these blue lines. This is a chamber system. It's designed to function in conjunction with this surface basin right here. So essentially all the flow that's currently making its way down into the gully that comes around Chroma is going to be brought into the system and mitigated, brought underground, infiltrated into the native sand and gravel, such that there's going to be a lot less flow coming out into the main gully right here. So this is project number 1 at the top. So this next map is the southern area. So this is off of Spencer Drive, and you can see this is a lot more complicated. And the reason is that there isn't really one solution that's going to work here to mitigate the runoff going into the Spencer Gully, which is actually right here. I can actually just draw it in red right here. This is the gully. This is the top of the gully right here. So all this area that we're looking at right in here, these are several of those Storm Tech chamber systems. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 of these. And the blue lines are just the piping network that's going to be collecting the runoff and bringing it into those chamber systems. In addition to chamber systems, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, these blue squares. These are dry wells. So these are just open catch basin type structures, which would sit in the paved swale along the road where water would come in and essentially just infiltrate into the ground. So these would be proposed within the swale. So the dry wells plus the chamber systems is really going to reduce the amount of runoff, which is going to be making its way into the gully. And that's going to be substantially reducing the amount of, erosion, sedimentation that's occurring down within the gully right there. Before I present the cost estimates, are there any questions about the projects? Right now, these are really just preliminary maps. They're sized, but we're going to be taking these and producing more of a formal 30% engineering design plans with some construction details as a part of our ultimate scope. We just haven't gotten to that stage yet. This is as far as we've gotten to date.
And so, Andre, this is new work that's being proposed as opposed to the board was aware of the EWP work, which is separate and not part of this current presentation.
Right, and is that I believe that's the stabilization type work that's in the gully, correct, in the northern gully?
Right, there's 300 feet of that. That's part of the EWP that also Chroma is doing other work as well.
Right, so that's correct.
The board was aware of that previously because we've been working with that for a while. So
I have a question.
How long does a system like this last?
Well, it can last. I mean, I think that the state does try to judge that. I think they use a 30-year lifespan, but the reality is these are the storm tech systems are HDPE pipe, so they can last a much longer period of time. You know, the systems will continue to function. The pipe won't degrade as long as they're maintained over time. You know, they'll last substantially longer than that.
And how expensive is that maintenance and how?
Yeah, so the maintenance of these, basically it kind of depends how much sediment is coming into them, but either once a year or sometimes once every other year, or possibly once every 3 years. The inlets to these systems is cleaned with a Vactor truck. So there's a manhole. The Vactor truck pulls up just like you would clean a catch basin, basically suck the material out. So, you know, the whole park here, I mean, this is probably a day's worth of Vactor time. So, you know, depending on how often that occurs, I mean, it's a pretty standard maintenance practice, but it does require that you have access to a vac truck. So there's, you know, I'm not quite sure if the town, what the access is for if you guys have your own vac truck, but if not, you'd have to hire somebody.
We get a daily rate depending upon the number of crews and where we're working. So it's a couple $1,000s a day.
It's not exorbitant or anything.
Right.
Well, it can be if you start running, you know, 4 or 5 days, you're into $10,000 or $12,000. So if you're working, you know, straight 8-hour days.
So this is all the drainage is caused by surface and no extraneous sources such as streams or adjacent areas that might be contributing to this problem.
Would you mind, I didn't catch part of that question. Would you mind just repeating that for me, please?
My question was, the plan that you're talking about is just going to contain or take care of surface runoff, and is there any extraneous or exterior items such as streams or brooks or something that may be contributing to this from another area?
No, the runoff is really from, you know, the rooftops, the parking lots, the driveways, all of the hard surfaces in the park, and also notably Route 5. So there is a substantial area of Route 5 which is actually draining down into the northern gully. So it's up along here. This section of Route 5 actually drains down, and it drains via a pipe across the Sonax facility. So that is also going to be picked up and brought into the system. So I think that, you know, that's one reason, just transitioning into the grant application that we're putting together. It's a VTrans grant, so it does have to have a transportation component. So there's definitely, you know, part of the road network is contributing to this. So that's going to be mitigated as well.
Thank you, Rick.
Do you provide any kind of a guarantee or a warranty if the thing doesn't work? Who's responsible?
I suppose that would need to be taken, you know, I mean, it's something that I don't think is really worked out at this point, given that the design hasn't even really been produced. I mean, what we're going to produce is the 30%, the initial design. Eventually there would need to be a final design, you know, certified engineering final design. And I mean, I think it would come with the warranties of whoever produced the, you know, the design in terms of the best. It would be produced with best engineering judgment. And, you know, it seems that the feasibility work that we've done so far suggests that the conditions are right. And, you know, we've been, you know, kind of laying the foundation for the work based on kind of the accepted practices of doing this, which is really using modeling tools that, you know, the state relies on for permit applications and new development design. So, you know, it's a package that, you know, we would expect it would do the job to, you know, mitigate the impact. I think, you know, one of the things is that, you know, in the northern gully, the state, my understanding is the state has classified that as a stream. So there's really limited amounts of work that you can actually do within the gully itself. And there is some work that's going to be done right at the top of the gully by Chroma. But I think beyond that, I think there's limitations in terms of how far you can go down that gully to actually stabilize it. The southern gully, Spencer Ave Gully, there may be the ability to further stabilize that gully, you know, further down. But again, I think, you know, by implementing all of these different chamber systems, we're really going to be reducing the amount of flow that's even going to be reaching the gully in the first place. So that's, you know, it's kind of a proactive solution rather than trying to say rock line the gully all the way down, because that doesn't really, you also need, and in addition to that, you need to get rid of the amount of runoff before it actually.
Andre, maybe from your engineering design standard, what year storm are you designing these amounts of drainage improvements? Is it the 50 or 100? I don't remember from our previous conversation.
It's actually, so the northern gully, the modeling that we've done so far suggests that the 100-year storm is going to be mitigated. So that's just over 5 inches of rain. The southern gully, because it's more challenging and because there's such limited space, we're really only able to control the 50-year storm, which is still a very significant amount of runoff. You know, something on the order of, I think, 4+ inches of rainfall. So anything below, you know, so the vast majority of rains that occur should be basically trapped and mitigated, you know, by the system and not allowed to discharge into the gully.
If we had a 50-year storm, would the system be overwhelmed, and would it destroy the system in any way or damage it?
No, the idea with these, you design these systems to safely bypass the larger storms. Essentially, they just fill up. And once they're filled up to capacity, the water would just be routed, you know, to a safe conveyance, you know, down past the system. So I'm happy to kind of pull up the cost estimate at this point. So here are the numbers that we've come up with so far, and I just want to make sure it's understood that these are preliminary and subject to revision, since the plans are really just sketch level at this point. We've, you know, used our best judgment. We've taken VTrans, you know, average yearly average values, and also gotten pricing from StormTech, which is the chamber vendor as well, to price their chambers, but it's all subject to revision given that the final, you know, design is not done yet. This is what we've come up with for the chamber systems along Imtech Lane and Spencer Drive, which is really the big ticket item. The cost estimate is just over $1 million. So that would include final design and implementation all in. In addition to that, we're carrying a cost for stabilizing the entire Spencer Drive gully. So that would be rock lining the gully from the road down to the railroad. So that would be, we have a cost carrying there of $150,000. And then the final line item is Chroma, as I had mentioned, is installing or is planning to install plunge pools, essentially rock lined plunge pools at the head of the Chroma gully, the northern gully. And so that number was provided to us by Chroma, $100,000 for that work. So the total of those three line items gets $1.325 million. And so the grant that we're currently looking at, that we're preparing the application for on behalf of the town, basically the total funding request could be $1,060,000, and the grant requires 20% match. So essentially that comes out to be $265,000 in match. So that, in addition to these numbers, I think the grant also will require a support letter from the town and an acknowledgement that the, where the source of the local match and also a commitment to future maintenance responsibility. And I think that saying must be dated within 1 year of the application. So that's just one thing I'll also to note for the application that we would request if this is something that's going to move forward.
So this is gonna save the railroad a ton of money in the event of, are they gonna kick in?
Well, the railroad's already mad at us because they spent $15,000 cleaning up the mud that you saw from some of those earlier pictures that wiped out 800 yards worth of track.
Right, but if the water came.
That
from
they didn't get
Route 5,
reimbursed because it came from up above. So they claimed that it was not reimbursable under FEMA. So V-Trans is not happy with us already.
Yeah, I understand that, but
Right.
Route 5 is where a lot of this water originates. That's a state piece of property.
Which is why we're going after this significant grant. So that'd be $1 million worth of state contribution.
Okay,
The 265 would be the local share, and we haven't approached some of our other business partners to see if we could potentially cost share in the balance of the rest of the program.
so one more question. This is public money that's improving a private property, basically, right?
No, all of this improvement is in the public right of way. So it's on the sides of the roads that we own, as well as, again, these are drainage conveyances. When the industrial park area was developed, and I don't have all of the dates of when that all happened, but the conveyance of the drainage came with those deeds when the town took that over. So
So Sonex property is affected by this, but it's our responsibility.
Whitney Blake, Sonex, all the other businesses that are up on Route 5 that all, the gas station across the street at the Mover has some impact on that as well. So they're all contributing to this as the water seeks the lowest point, and that's down the hill under the railroad tracks and into the Connecticut River.
So you're saying that it is the town's responsibility because that was part of the deed, that town was responsible for the water.
There's language in the deed that talks about drainage rights and conveyances, but there's no attached, there is no filed, particularly easements that we can find on any of this. So it goes back, into the 60s and 50s, some of this, and even previous to that.
And there's no precedent being set that if someone else has a drainage problem somewhere else in the town, where the water comes from one of our road, are we setting a precedent here by doing this anywhere or not?
Well, we always have responsibility to maintain drainage. That's why we have stormwater and all sorts of other improvements all over.
Right.
And it gets to become complicated when you're dealing with, you can see from that original map, right? When you look at all the drainage and subbasins, where does water come from? How is it managed? It's not an easy problem to understand, and then it's an expensive problem to fix.
Absolutely.
So I guess the best news I can give you at this point is we feel pretty confident with the work that Andre and his team have done, that we have a pretty good understanding now of how the watershed functions. Probably when they did some of the improvements on Route 5 over the last 30 and 40 years, they could have addressed some of these things, but they weren't looking at these comprehensive types of solutions. We found pipes where we couldn't figure out where they originated and why they were there. Some were blocked, some were functioning. Catch basins that didn't connect to places that it should have connected. So there's a hodgepodge of improvements that have been made over time. This is addressing it more holistically. And it's expensive. I'm not, it's not an easy fix.
A lot of the expenses is crushed stone and gravel. Do we have that level of material in our own pits that we can?
We can
pull
make
into?
it.
Yeah.
We don't have it on hand currently, but there is some that we could offset potentially with some of our own material.
So that could, I mean, it's
Yeah,
cost, it's
some.
still cost, but it's not
Yes.
at the same cost of going out and purchasing.
So that could become part of our local share, will be contributing material possibly.
I think as we go down the road and we get into design and bid, that's something we could definitely take a look at, because we'll have to get quantities and what sizes are specified, and then we have to get some estimate as to what we could produce that might be an offset.
How confident are we that this will really take care of all the issues up there? This pretty well looks at that whole area, doesn't it? And it really is a plan for
Right.
dealing with all of the drainage issues.
Well, I think Andre was as honest with you as he could be in terms of the drainage design standards, the 100-year storm and 50-year storm. The problem is when we have events like we had last July 30th, when you have a period of time where you get rain in that short of a window, and when you equate it to what the volumes are, it works out to the 500-year storm event. It's in a short burst. So those are climate change events, and none of us can predict how and when those things are going to happen again. So it's
And it would
really
be, they're very small areas that it impacts.
right.
It could, a mile down the road, you don't have a problem.
Right. So it's really, I feel better that this design will work on the vast majority of storms that we know about. But again, if we have another one of those incidents where we have something parked on top of us and dump 2 inches of rain an hour for 2 or 3 hours, this system will get overwhelmed just like every other stormwater system. Nobody's designed to that standard.
And we don't know yet what any federal climate change funding is available we may want to also look at, this is just fixing 2 areas of the drainage, correct? Not the,
Yeah, to really take a look at this more comprehensively, and we're still working on larger issues that, impact other areas in Bellows Falls and other areas in Rockingham. So this is not unusual. You're going to have a bid coming back to you to buy a piece of property on Brockway Mills that's impacted by, steep slopes where a house is basically having to be bought by the government in return. It won't be developed. So I think this is our present and our future as we go forward. These things are going to be parts of our conversations, parts of our budgets, and then I think we got to work with our federal partners on some of these larger projects because they can easily wipe out our capital and our borrowing capability.
It's a thing of point of history, but several years ago, down at the exit by Leslie's Tavern, they discovered a lot of runoff came off of 91, and it washed out a big gully down a little further than that on the south side of the exit ramp down there, and I think the state had to get in there and do some remediation to that. So that was caused by the way they drained the water off of 91. So just a point of history. My wife has the information on that, or the background. She was there when that happened, so.
So really what we're asking you for tonight is just the, go ahead on the V-Trans environmental mitigation grant with an understanding that we'll come back to you if we're successful and talk about, working with other partners and what our ultimate financing or funding of this will be. It's going to be a period of time, obviously, to go through the grant process. But I wanted to bring this to your attention because it's impacting businesses now, as we've already seen with the EWP and with the chroma work. And then I'm going to have a supplemental request to help repair just some of the damage that's already impacting the railroad. So we can at least try to mitigate that before we have a major washout, a major railroad issue here in the future.
Who will approach the partners? Is that something you will do?
Yeah, we'll chat with them and we'll come back to the board and let you know where we stand. So we have a working group now of people that have been involved in this and are, I think, pretty committed to working on solutions.
So you need a motion to support the Vermont Trans Environmental Mitigation Grant application, correct?
Yes, please.
Someone want to make the motion, or,
so moved.
okay, will we hear a second?
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve to support the Vermont Trans Environmental Mitigation Grant application as presented. Any further comments? Questions? Hearing none, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Andre.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you for the time on your presentation on that
We
one.
got to take the hosting back from you now. Or maybe you have to give it to me. Maybe you have to give it back to me.
I got to give it back. Okay, let me see.
Back to me, so we're back.
Oh, yep, there we go.
Perfect. Thank you, Andre.
You got it. Good night.
Good night.
I know Fritz Earth Institute is up there. Are they waiting for something, or?
I'm not aware of anything specific.
Okay. And we'll keep
Go
going.
to the swap shop conversation.
Yeah, there was some conversation with Abe Noe Hayes with the Rich Earth Institute, thinking that there might be some stuff come up around the recycling center, since that was on, I know that Swap Shop was named specifically, but he was concerned about some of the issues around the traffic and so forth with the urine depot startup. And didn't know if that was gonna be on there. It looks like it's actually not Abe on, but,
Well, let's get into the discussion for the recycling center operations, and then they can chime in towards the end of this. Then this next item on the discussion for recycling center operations, the swap shop. In your packet, there's a letter from Scott explaining the situation. Also, there is a letter from Walpole Recycling Center. It comes out, it's called Crash Talk. Letter from the Westminster Conservation Commission. Support, also a notice in there, and there's a poster that we put up down there for items that will no longer be accepted, and the reasons therefore. That being said, I will let Mr. Hovis, I guess you're gonna present,
Sure.
and you can start, and we'll
Thank you for putting me on the agenda. I have just made copies of the proposal and the petition as well. There are over 400 signatures on this petition of people that have high hopes of seeing the swap shop return. And most everyone has thanked me for creating this collection. Here you go, officially 409 signatures. There was maybe 3 or 4 people that declined to sign, so that's less than 1% of the people I approached are in favor of swap shops. It's my understanding from a previous select board meeting that there was a tentative agreement to create an advisory committee, which sounds like a great idea to me for moving forward with this. I welcome any and all discussions. I have lots of good ideas, and I would like to be on that committee if it's so created.
Would you like me to speak to it?
you can start.
Sorry. Yeah, I volunteered to take the lead as liaison with the committee. So if 3 or 4 people from this list of citizens who.
Lonnie, I can't hear you at all. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I volunteered to be the liaison with the committee. So if the citizens that are concerned want to appoint 4 people from their group, I will work with them. What I would like to do is reach out officially as a select board member to the select boards of Walpole, Brattleboro, and Springfield and discuss with them exactly how they operate, what their policies, hours, fees, if any, how many people it takes to run it, and what cost, if any, falls back on the town from operating this. And I would like to work with this group and come back in December with a well thought out detailed proposal for our board to look at.
Thank you, great. I would add that I'm sure that the people that signed this weren't necessarily signing on to any additional
I understand
volunteer
that.
work. And so it's my understanding that if the select board is creating a committee, that they sort of put that out to the public in the normal venue, however you create committees with people. And so we're not going to just rely on the 400 people that may have signed the petition, but that maybe there's another mechanism for gathering interested parties for this committee.
But I don't know, if there's gonna be an official committee, or I was thinking I would be just a liaison to your committee.
I don't have a committee. I think it should be an official committee if that's a possibility.
Well, I don't know, what do you think, Scott?
Well, there's a couple of things I think that go into the conversation, because the issue of the swap shop space is really critical to determining how much of how large an operation can be supported, or how constrained of an operation. And part of the issue is, and this is something that the board has to decide on a policy standpoint, is we've been approached by the solid waste district in the past about doing other types of recycling. We have held off on doing some of those. Some of those are cardboard, and we've talked about the constraints of trying to do that. We've talked about potentially doing glass recycling, which is also a potential opportunity to recover costs. Book recycling, which we've only briefly touched on, which I think might be part of the swap shop proposal as well. But that's a different, the type of recycling that we were talking about with books is a little different than the reuse type that the swap shop's looking at. So all of those are space competitions. And then the existing space that we're already using for our batteries, our electronics, and the other kinds of materials that have to be indoors. So I think the two considerations that I have just looking at it is how much space can be realistically dedicated to that kind of an operation. And then if it is, how do you want to manage that so that it is not an impact on the rest of the operation going forward? Because I think that's one of the biggest considerations is how would you manage that process? So those will be the two considerations that I would ask the board to take a hard look at.
Right, and that's what I would have foremost in my mind as I discuss with other towns,
Right.
how they approach it, how much square footage do they allow to it? Is their center heated? Ours is not.
Right.
And so forth and so on.
Right.
But I mean, as far as, do we need to make an actual official committee, like our cemetery committee, or can I just operate as a liaison with a group that apparently Daniel is interested in? I would assume you know a couple other people.
I might be able to dig up a few people.
Well, the difference, I think, if the board appoints a committee, then based on, open meetings laws, you have the requirements to do agendas, publish
All that
minutes,
stuff.
follow all the normal process that, is required of any of our other operating committees.
Well,
Well, would it be sufficient just to have me be a liaison with your working group?
But I don't have a working group, I just have 400 signatures.
Or do you think you could put one together?
That's a very good question.
All right, well, maybe you should contact me when you have.
Go that route. I guess there's no middle ground to that, any other approach. In other words, if the select board sort of acknowledges that we're going to create an ad hoc committee as such, and that would advise the select board, then that gives me some ability to approach people. If it's just me on my own, asking someone if you would be interested in having a conversation, that seems like
Well, all you really have to do is say, select board has designated a representative to work with us, you and your group. Would you like to be part of that group? And what we will be doing is communicating or visiting other towns to see how they manage their facility. Simple as that.
Scott, would you be willing to, or someone from the staff be willing to join that committee? Because you guys have the on the ground responsibility / experience.
Right.
So I think if we had people, the advocates and the people who would have to make it happen in the same room, we could get a lot more done with Bonnie as the liaison.
Well, the thing is, I'm not intending to come up with any solutions, right?
You're gonna bring information back.
But we could bring information back, and then that information can be examined by the staff, by Scott, and by this entire board. Does it seem feasible for us with what we've got to work with?
On the bike ped committee, we have Chuck is he kind of advises the bike ped people. Chuck is sort of part of, we're an official select board committee, but we have staff liaison person, Chuck, who really does help provide us with guidance and perspective. And it's important to have someone in the governmental entity that provides that, or in the staff, in my mind. And
I think going forward, if we decide to pursue this and have one, yeah.
Okay, so you see that as the second step, an official.
Yeah, actually, I'm really just talking about a very first step, a fact finding step, really.
All right.
I don't know.
Before we get too far out on this limb, that got cut off, what's your designs for people to be on this committee? And the reason I'm asking that is all these outside towns have no skin in the game down to that recycling center. Rockingham pays all the bills. So if there is going to be an advisory committee, it could be Rockingham residents. The other people can attend the meeting, but as it was told to us from the select board in Westminster, we have no skin in the game what goes on in Westminster. Now, just so people understand, the Village of Bellas Falls owns that facility and they lease it to the town of Rockingham. So Westminster, the only thing Westminster has to do is they send us a nice tax bill every year. We pay it. So that's one of the reasons why the access sticker system was instituted, because there needs to be some additional income coming in. We have discussed cardboard, like we're looking at $150,000 investment to get a binding machine and a forklift or some other type of materials to move those things. And then you got to store it inside that building, which will take up the whole building if we go with cardboard. Now, I talked to Mary at the Windsor South District this afternoon, and she said, forget the cardboard because it's not a productive situation. You have to save the cardboard for so long. And she suggested, as Scott just mentioned a little while ago, glass recycling. Problem with that would have to also be inside because you can't throw the glass on the ground. When I went to Springfield, I visited every recycling center around here before you even got there. And they do the same thing. People just walk up there and bring the bottles in, and where they smash, they smash. They don't, so they do have bins for separate colored glass. That depends, is another situation where you have to store it and wait till the price comes up. I got an email today, I think Tom Kennedy mentioned something about, now they're talking about textile recycling, but that's another labor intensive thing. They want saleable items, so you can't bring down just anything you want to get rid of. Somebody has to inspect it, they have to separate it, has to be cleaned. That seems to be an item that I wouldn't want to get involved with. It's worse than the swap shop.
Well, that's all recycling, and that's not what
Right,
we're
but-
even considering
Well,
here.
the same thing is what happened with swap shop.
Well,
So you got your chance, Mr. Hokus. Let me explain where I'm coming from. I've seen your proposal and your 400 signatures, and you know, I appreciate the Rockingham, I appreciate the work you've done, but I think Westminster signatures don't have a lot of weight in my mind. Anyway, that's
I'm sorry, do you
where
have
mine's
Westminster
coming from.
signatures on there?
But
A letter, I think.
so you know, as Scott mentioned, there's very little room down there. And I know Walpole has a limit on items that they take in. You can only leave 3 items. You can take as many as you want, but you can only leave 3 items. They also have a donation that when you take them, you're supposed to pay for stuff that you take out. Springfield works the same way. You're supposed to pay for it. Give you a little background before you talk to them. I spent the time, called Brattleboro. Their facility does operate no conjunction with the town whatsoever. That's all a volunteer operation. They just let them use part of the building. Charlestown's the same way. They do the same thing. They don't have anything to do with the town. Something happens over there, that's their issue to take care of. So that being said, I noticed you got a proposal here, creating a funded position for 1 or 2 part-time individuals to perform the task. So where's that funding coming from? Hopefully not from the town of Rockingham.
So I believe there is funding available from ARPA funding that was wrapped into the municipal budgets of both Westminster and Rockingham. And as a matter of fact, I have applied for that funding by sending in separate project proposals to both towns. I have not heard back from Rockingham as yet. I have had a meeting with Westminster and have refined my proposal and will resubmit it. I'm sure that there are other sources of funding for projects like this, including donations, including other revenue streams. And I think it would be a great idea to go visit the other swap shops and recycling centers. Because in my own experience from visiting them, I've seen a lot of really great things happening. I've seen a lot of people that are volunteering and making a difference in their community. Everybody that signed this, thank you for trying to put this thing together. I realize that it's difficult. I realize there's a limited amount of space, but I also realize that a lot of people have a lot of things that they want to share. And I want to see that money is kept in the community rather than buying stuff in big box stores that ends up getting thrown out a year later because it breaks. I think that there is a possibility of being able to work with the community and work with the people at the existing facility to create something that's really special and serves the community.
I think there is a possibility as well, and I think it could be a good thing. It certainly cause for tremendous lamentation that our culture today is a throwaway culture, that most of the appliances we buy are made to be repaired, and so forth and so on. I don't know if it's up to a small town like this one to address these huge systemic outrages, but it would be good if we could do something like this. All this debating about how much footage we have, will volunteers work, will they not work? I envision that for later, after I have worked with a group of citizens who are willing to put a little time out and come up with really complete and detailed reports of how other places make it, that we can compare and contrast with what we have in the way of facilities and so forth and so on. And that's when we would have all these debates. I don't think it's important to have them tonight.
I'm willing to try to gather a group of citizens together.
That
See if
would
we can go.
probably be helpful.
I would like to support, I really want to thank Bonnie for doing this. This is a big, really important step to gather the data. So it's
Yeah,
not emotion driven, it's data driven. And we can see what's worked elsewhere and what hasn't worked elsewhere. So my only question is how we structure your committee,
I don't even want to call it a committee, honestly.
advisory group.
You can call it whatever you want to call it, and I'll be here in the task force.
Task force?
You can do something,
Call it
anything
task
you want.
force? All right.
Task force. That
So-
sounds good.
Yeah, the idea
Give it a
here
name.
is to get beyond anecdotes, casual conversations with people that work there or people that got stuff there, and to really go to the official level and find out from the other select boards how you operate this, how satisfied are you with it, does it cost you money, all those things, and really get concrete, verifiable information to bring back to this board and to the township.
I would like to move that we appoint Bonnie as our liaison to a task force to study the feasibility of the swap shop at the Rockingham Recycling Center. That's a motion.
I'll second that.
All right, motion remained and seconded to appoint Bonnie as a liaison to a task force to study the recycling center. Any further comments? Go yourself.
I would just say that that's not a commitment to move forward with anything. It's only fact finding.
Exactly.
And it may or may not, result in taking any action.
Elijah, I can't drift it off.
I said that I just want to say that would be just fact finding. It wouldn't necessarily result in any action in the future. It's just at this point, this would just be to gather data.
Yeah, this is
Correct.
just to gather official, verifiable information that we can sit here and discuss and look at, will this work for us? Is our building big enough, or whatever the issues are? Is our traffic flow down there suitable for this? Can we make changes that would make it work, and so forth? To bring this debate up another level instead of just, well, I don't like this, I don't like that. Let's really take a good, serious look at what we could and couldn't do.
Thank you. I've received more calls and emails about this than any other issue since I've been on the select board.
Same here.
So people care about it. And
Yeah,
I
people
want to
do.
thank Daniel for what you've done. I want to thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, I know people care. I care about it as well, but I am very cognizant of the challenges that we have. But I am more than willing, I'm eager to use my position as an elected representative of Rockingham and reach out to other towns and get the actual information that we need to discuss this intelligently.
Thank you all. Okay, do we need a second to the motion? We didn't get one.
Yes.
We get one more
No,
comment.
Sue did, okay. So, motion's been made and seconded.
I think somebody
Any
has a
further
question.
discussion, comments?
I think we had one more.
I can wait till after the vote to comment.
Oh.
It's not about the vote itself.
Okay.
It's about just the swap shop in general.
Okay. All right,
Aye.
motion made and seconded, to appoint Bonnie as the liaison to the task committee, would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed would say nay. Motion carries. See you around the campus when we get the information we needed. Scott, I'm gonna have you, make a copy of the proposal, not necessarily, all the petition signatures. We can keep those on file in the office, but I think just for the board, so we can have a copy of what's there.
Oh, so we all have a copy?
Did you have, everybody get one?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, then, we're
Yeah,
all set.
and the woman over there would like to say something. There's a lady over there that would like to speak. She's got her hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, everybody. My name is Wendy. I live on Rockingham Street. Wait, let me take this off. To speak. I live on Rockingham Street here in the village, and I moved here in April. I have anecdotal support. I know that maybe folks are tired of anecdotes, but I think they're important because stories are important. And so it's talking to each other. I used to live in Brattleboro and I frequented the swap shop down there and I really loved it. And even before I moved to this town, I came to Rockingham Swap Shop because it had a great reputation as being a place to get things, to divert it from the landfill. I don't know if this has been part of the discussion because I'm new to it, but we have one landfill left in Vermont. I think it's in Coventry. And it's gonna have to get capped at a certain point. And so diverting as many things from the landfill as possible is going to save Rockingham money in the long run, because once we have to start shipping our things farther than Coventry, we all know what fuel costs and it's gonna cost more of those tipping fees. Aside from the, the hard data and the numbers, having a swap shop is really helpful for low and moderate income people, not only to get goods, but to bring them so we don't have to pay to throw them away. Sometimes it just happens, you have things. It's also going to reduce illegal dumping, seeing things on the side of the road. And it's also a good community building exercise. You meet your neighbors at the swap shop, and it's a way for people to work together to trade things without having to have finances be part of it. So you get to meet your neighbors, do this project together, and then go take their stuff. So I really encourage any work that can happen to really look at this. And I understand all the different considerations about what are we going to do with the building, but I would be surprised if it didn't bear out that even if we had to have paid staff, that the reduction in fees from taking all that stuff to the landfill would pay for itself. Again, that's just conjecture. You folks can crunch the numbers and Mr. Pickup, but I want to support it. I'm not on the petition. I only found out about the petition recently, and I prefer just to show up and represent myself rather than put my name on a piece of paper. No disrespect to Mr. Hovis who collected it, but this is how I prefer to convey my wishes. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me.
Thank you. Moving on, there are some items that kind of due to the items that we weren't taking down, if anybody needs some news from here. Now we're gonna move on to the adopt charge for the cemetery committee.
Yeah, so I just, a couple of items just so that we can move forward with this process with the cemetery committee. I'm gonna hand around a copy of the fees for the actual cemetery perpetual care and things are broken out. Just wanted the board to have some information about that because there is some money that's set aside and by Vermont state statute, money that is set aside for perpetual care funds, we can only spend the earnings off of that. So if somebody does You can see it's a $260 charge. It's been in effect since 2009 for people that come to our clerk's office and request a plot. And that money goes into a separately maintained fund, which is interest bearing. And then every year that interest does accumulate. So there is some monies that are generated for perpetual care. It doesn't potentially cover the costs that we have discussed about possible improvements like graveling roads or repairing fences or doing major tree work, but there is some money that does flow into long-term care for these facilities. It's segmented into budget. There is an actual cemetery perpetual care account. If you guys are interested in looking at your budget papers, it's 140-07-2300. 00.00. The only thing that's different from these 2009 breakdowns is that the recording fees now from the clerk are $30 as opposed to $20, but the rest of the fees have not changed since they were last modified by the select board back in 2009. With that sort of as a background, I guess the next steps, if the board is interested in formally creating a committee, would be how you would want that to be, number of potentially how many members, and then ultimately move forward with a process so that they could advise the board going forward.
Questions, Glenn?
Yes.
The fund that is established by these fees, interest rates are so small, and have been for the past 20 years, it can't generate much income.
It doesn't. I think it's $7,000 or $8,000, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we obviously run quite a deficit on that.
If you look at it compared to what we pay for just mowing and maintenance, yeah, it's not close.
Now, if these, when you say, does cost per grave, like if I die tonight and my son says, oh, I wanted to be buried up there on Oak Hill, it only costs $50 for a spot?
No, you have to run all the way out to the far end of the breakdown of the column spine. So it'd be $540 because you have to add another $10 on recording fees for a
That's all?
single plot.
Really?
It is surprisingly cheap.
That's really
Yeah.
cheap.
That's just,
I think we paid
that's,
$5,000 for my father's spot.
the other pieces that go into that was part of that other breakdown that we went through that talks about, for people digging and other preparation fees.
Right.
Those are separate than what
Right.
the actual,
Actual cost of the
Correct.
plot.
right.
That's really cheap.
It's pretty affordable compared to some others that I've seen, and that might be something that the committee would take a look at and maybe come back with a recommendation to the board.
So you could buy 10, like a family plot of 10 grave sites?
Sure, it's great Christmas gifts.
We have to wrap it.
It's a gift that keeps on gifts forever.
Yeah.
Keep on giving, you got it.
The more die, the more you get.
Okay, we done with the cemetery committee. Do we need to adopt the charge.
Right,
Do we want to improve the charge? It's pretty much, it's a simple charge.
very simple, yeah.
It's printed up on your instructor letter here. Someone does make a comment, that's for agreeable, someone make a motion.
So this is the charge, but if we make a committee, the committee might say we're gonna double this 530.
Well, they would make a recommendation. All they can really do is just give you suggestions and recommendations, and the board ultimately has to make the
Right, yeah.
decisions on what they want to do.
But for now, we don't have a committee, so could we now say we wanna raise this price?
We could do it as part of the budget. We could do it whenever you wanted to. I thought it would make more sense if you did want to form a committee, that's something that they would work on.
Okay, all right, I'm just trying to understand this, okay, yeah.
The
Yeah,
other
that-
issues, I know that Elijah had issues about cemetery maintenance and improvement.
Yeah,
Would those fall under the purview of this committee?
Well, I think it would.
I mean, they would be potentially the ones who would be looking for, grant money or something like that, because, there might be a significant amount of grant money available. It would really just be to expand capacity beyond what we have, I think, in our staff right now, really.
Yeah,
to
just To
And
Elijah's point for sure, right? The spring, the Rockingham Meeting House folks want to do a public event where they train people on techniques on how to clean stones without damaging these historic markers. And there's an opportunity, maybe if we had a committee and the committee made a recommendation to the board that maybe the board might want to support that by buying some of this. There's a cleaning agent that's non-toxic that they would recommend, and that's part of the training, for example. And those are the kinds of things that could come to the committee. On top of regular maintenance, I think, that we had talked about previously about fences, trees, gravel roads, things that have not received adequate attention over time.
do we think it would be kind of a working committee like some of our other committees where they potentially do put in,
I like committees that work.
some hours,
Yes. I like that. Yeah, committees are great to recommend, but committees that also do
Yeah.
are very, very helpful.
Well, it's always nice when they're not just telling you that you should do something about it.
Yes.
Spend some more money. Maybe they actually go find some money.
Well, you've had luck with that, with your work in downtown Bellas Falls. It looks great, but what
Doesn't it?
people have done with,
Yeah.
there are people here who are willing to chip in.
Yeah.
Okay, that being said, let's read this thing. The cemetery committee would be established for the purpose of advising the select board in matters of care and maintenance of all town-owned cemeteries. The number of the committee members shall be determined by the select board. The committee shall choose from their number a chairperson who shall be responsible for compliance with posting, meeting dates, times per the requirements of the open meeting law, as well as posting minutes for any votes taken. No policy-making decisions of the committee are valid unless approved by the select board. That being said, I'll take a motion to adopt that statement of purpose.
Do we have to figure out who's gonna be our select board person?
No,
It'll come later, right?
That will come later.
you don't need a person on the select board on here. Those people come to the board with their recommendations. Why do you need
Oh, okay, it doesn't say that here.
a, so it says so.
Oh, just determined by, okay. Oh, all right, so the chairperson of the committee, okay, I understand. I move that we adopt the
Statement of purpose.
statements of purpose for the cemetery committee.
Give me a second.
A second.
Discussion.
The liaison function, is that important? I mean, if the committee goes off in this direction, if somebody could offer some advice about, here's what's practical, here's what we've learned in the past.
I think Walter Wallace would be,
Walter would do that?
I think, yeah, he's
Okay.
nominated pretty much himself to be on that committee, and I'm sure they're probably gonna put him as chair.
Oh, good, all right,
I
that's
mean,
great.
he's on top of the grant situation,
Yeah,
so.
that worked for you, Elijah?
And I do have a pretty active group right now working at the meeting house on cemetery-related issues. This is more formalizing that across all of our current town-owned facilities, not just the meeting house.
So I should find my gravesite soon before the question. No, we're not right. He's there.
Okay, let's move to item 4, approve the DCTV CDBG grant application.
We didn't vote.
All right,
Take a
let's
vote.
vote now.
Oh, no, no.
All those in favor of the statement of purpose, adopting the statement of purpose for the cemetery committee would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now can we move to 4?
Yes.
All right. Approve the CDBG grant application. It's in your packet, and there were 3 motions, I believe, on the page there to be made, so as we get to them.
Yeah, so these are really continuations of actions that you had previously taken, and Gary had asked if we could bring these back because there was specific language that he needed adopted by the board in order for these to go forward as completed applications. So the motions that you see are basically to give him the ability then to complete those particular applications, and we're fully submitted. It's just more of a housekeeping issue at this point. The second one, we'll talk about in a little more detail, the Wyndham Regional.
Has everybody had a chance to read this, or are they reading it currently?
Yeah, they're right.
Yeah,
I read it. I didn't really
Okay, so, that being the case, let's start with making the first motion.
I move that we adopt the resolution as presented for the town implementation grant application for sub-grant to GRAS.
Take the first one, or you want to do that first, go backwards, that's okay.
Isn't that the first? Oh, no, sorry, move to adopt the resolution as presented for the town planning grant application.
Here, a second.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to move to adopt the resolution that's presented for the town planning grant application. Further discussion, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now let's move to the second. Which is one you just said, Rick.
Okay. Pass those to Peter. Those are the actual copies of the what he'll have to submit based on your motion.
So we have to sign them now?
Yeah, so you can just send them around.
Okay.
The second piece is we were working on a transportation alternatives grant for looking at traffic and other movements in and around the School Street, Atkinson Street, School Street extension intersections, and been a point of concern with parents and with boards and other folks about what kinds of improvements can be made. We worked with the school district in the interim to do the rapid flash and beacon signs, which you now see, to help with the main crossing there, but there's obviously more work to be done. What this would do is give us a project manager that's going to work through Wyndham Regional, and I attached the resume for this person, as well as there's basically an application that will be working specifically through Wyndham Regional to complete this work. And there'll be a public process that goes with it. They usually design alternatives. There's required public meetings, and then ultimately preferred alternatives are then potentially adopted. They can then be either funded with grants or other opportunities, depending upon how expensive and how detailed some of their alternatives might be. So what this does is it opens up our grant, our TAP grant, the $40,000. We would be working with a specific person through Wyndham Regional, and ultimately this would be coming back to us in a series of public meetings and then some recommendations on alternatives for improvements.
Is Matthew's work funded by the grant, by the town, or by Wyndham Regional?
In this specific case, we're buying his time to do the grant specific work. So he's a Wyndham Regional employee. This is an add-on to their other activities.
So he would be billing us per hour for his work, or
Through the grant, he'd be reimbursed through the grant.
Oh, he'd be reimbursed from the grant,
Correct.
and if the grant isn't accepted, then we don't have to pay anything.
We've already received the grant.
Oh,
This
good.
is in lieu of us going out and hiring like a VHB or hiring one of these other, engineering type firms, which also do this kind of work at a different level and at a different rate. Yeah, this is a little more affordable, and I think we can do more with the grant monies than we could if we hired a significant engineering firm. Not to, and I don't want to belittle those guys, they do great work, but this is just a more economical approach for us.
Yeah. How, at the end of this, there'll just be like some preliminary ideas, right? Like just some options, and then if we decide to pursue one of those, then it would go to,
Typically what they'll do is they'll look at alternatives, and then through a series of public meetings and then ultimately working with the board, there'll be a preferred alternative if there was going to be something that was pursued for more funding or actual, changes in the road and the traffic patterns and what have you. So Gary has some inputs to this too.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we originally wanted the transportation alternative grant to build the intersection, which they found up to $300,000. And they indicated that they really wanted to see the scoping and a number of professionally engineered alternatives presented before they were willing to ante up that kind of money to build the intersection. So it's worth taking the extra time in year to get a good solution and to get the state funds to implement the solution.
Question, building the intersection, so we've got these streets that cross And what kind of stuff are we talking about? I'm a little vague. Is anyone clear on this?
They could do bump outs, they might propose other kind of traffic calming measures, they might look at one way potentially on some of this, if there's an opportunity to look at that, depends on traffic patterns. So they'll look at all of those things as part of their analysis, and then they'll come back to you with pedestrian counts, traffic counts, other data, so decisions could be looked at, alternatives can be looked at.
And V-Trans, because is that the Route 5 alternate through town?
That's right.
So would V-Trans be involved?
They will definitely be involved, because no matter what we do, we're gonna have to work with them ultimately if we're working in that right of way to make improvements, so they'll be part of the conversation.
Okay, discussion seems to be depleted here on this one, so if someone wants to make the motion on the bottom of the page, and we'll go back to the Grosso motion. We just discussed the Wyndham Regional Commission thing, so somebody make that motion on the bottom of the page.
I move to appoint Wyndham Regional Commission and specifically Matthew Bachelor as the municipal project manager for the CA 0706 Rockingham PAT 22 parentheses 12 grant.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. We've had the discussion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Now we can move up to the Dross. And that was one that we acted on back in September 6th. And this is just to reaffirm our actions at that point. So if someone wants to make that motion to on the grass.
I will again, adopt the resolution as presented for the town implementation grant application for sub-grant to grass.
Here, a second. Okay, motion's made and seconded to move to adopt the resolution submitted for the town implementation grant application for sub-grant to grass. And further discussion, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
It's great.
Yeah.
A big good project. Looking forward to it.
Are you guys going to think Elijah needs to sign those last two?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go down to last item. It's going to be supplement funding request for stormwater issues, Spencer Drive, Industrial Drive. Scott, I guess you can take the lead on this one.
Right, so we went through this larger scoping of this larger project that will address, I think, the stormwater concerns at multiple locations, but what this specific request grew out of is this conversation that we've been having with V-Trans about the washout of the area where the railroad culvert is. And as you can see from some of these pictures, Gary went out in the field with some of these folks, and you can see that there has been incredible amounts of washouts since the July storms. And then if you look at just the one picture that shows how much mud and debris is going down and clogging the current railroad drainage, and they've been cleaning those out. They've been telling us on average, what, every 6 months?
Well, 4 times in the past month. With the heavy rains.
Yeah, so I think this will not be a solution. I don't want to mislead the board. The $10,000 is really to just do a stabilization, is to get some heavy stone. And the contractor we'd be working with, we did go out and request quotes from various guys. We got 3 guys to bid. The prices were anywhere from 23 grand down to roughly 10 grand. Working with Basins, who's also going to be doing some of the work with the Chroma project. They can do this as part of that as a supplemental agreement for up to $10,000 and basically be able to put stone in and stabilize the areas that Gary's standing in, so that if we have additional washouts, it won't be as dramatic, washing down the debris and material and clogging up the basins until we can get potentially the funding for the larger solutions, which we were looking at earlier this evening, which is much more involved. It's going to require, getting through a grant process, getting through some agreements, and maybe some alternate funding with some of our business folks, and then ultimately back to the board for approval, and then bidding, and then ultimately construction. So those are longer term solutions to this problem. This would just give us some immediate relief and potentially avoid having another 800-yard washout of the railroad facility down there next to the river.
Scott or Gary, can you orient us? Where, Gary, are you standing below the railroad right of way?
So that's, no. So the problem is all the dirt that's there is in a property that the town owns the drainage rights to. And all of that dirt that's missing, that hole, is what's covering the tracks and clogging the culverts. And I don't know if you can see in there, but there's some rocks, large rocks that the railroad put in last August after the July storm. And the distance between the rocks and the new, actually, it might not be in that picture, but. Okay, so that's the, that hole is right below the road, Industrial Drive. So if that hole moves another, about 5 yards, it's at the side of the road. And where Spencer Drive meets Industrial Drive, and then the road starts going in. If a little bit past that hole, the picture's not there, but it's about twice as high. The dirt that's missing, that the ledge is about 15 feet high, and the distance between where they put the rocks last August and where that wall of dirt is about 20 yards that moved just in the 1 year. So this measure will just stop some of the volume that's carrying all the dirt that's coming from the very top and washing a couple of 100 yards till it gets to down and around the gully till it gets to the tracks. So it's stopping where most of the dirt is coming out way up by the road and going into the culvert and over the railroad tracks.
Okay, so is there a chance of Spencer Drive being undermined?
Eventually, but these rocks will stop that. This is
Okay.
the stopgap measure is right at Spencer Drive where the biggest speed is picked up from the water dropping into that hole. So it'll get us through to next year when the larger repairs come.
Somebody needs to invent forest roads, forest parking lots.
Take into account. You're a state with lots of hills and elevation, and unfortunately with climate change, we're starting to see some of the impacts of that. This is gonna be our reality for a while.
Well, when we completely run out of gasoline, then we can tear up some of these blacktop areas.
Won't stop the hills from sliding in the rain. That's the biggest challenge we have.
Okay, you will need a motion to authorize $10,000 from the current fund balance to purchase stone riprap. Someone want to make the motion?
I move that we authorize $10,000 to purchase stone.
Riprap.
Riprap.
He's not a rapper, it's rip rap.
Big stone.
Okay.
We'll hear a second.
I second.
Is this coming from the highway budget or the general fund?
Asking for the general fund, because we're waiting on all the reimbursements
Still have
from
FEMA money.
FEMA. We've gotten one so far out of our 4.
Before God help us.
Oh, we
I see that. You can buy a whole Jeep down there now. Okay, motion made and seconded. Can we get a second on the motion? Yes. To authorize $10,000 from the current fund balance of the general fund to purchase stone riprap to repair the situation. Stopgap measure. All those in favor would say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Carry. Okay, do we have the total warrants?
Not this evening, no.
Okay, let's move down to agenda items for October 18th, 2022. The usual financials which should be on there.
Yes.
You have the church place that we're still waiting on.
We'll have that. That should be on, hopefully, that agreement and the hay field agreement that we talked about in August as well.
Anybody else have anything? Anybody thinks of anything? Send us an email and we'll see about getting going there. Agenda items for the joint board. It's November 29.
I thought was there another one until January?
I thought so too, but when I looked at November, we do have the 5th Tuesday.
Just had one here last month.
Yeah.
A week ago.
I think we've been having a meeting every week for a while.
We have a proposed budget schedule that I'll be sending you too, so.
That's good. That's okay. I don't know, you got the proposal, everybody, I think got the proposal. Did you just send? You
No, I haven't
didn't.
sent it to
Yes.
everybody, I was just looking at dates.
There's a proposal in there that Scott can send you guys just for planning purposes, so look forward to working on the budget. Okay, other business, let's start with Elijah tonight. Nothing, Bonnie? Rick? Nope. Sue?
No, not really, other than, speaking of the railroad, the beavers are back. That lasted about 3 days, and we've had very little rain, and it's already full again. In Barnesville.
Which road is
In
this?
Barnesville, Lower Barnesville. So I don't know, they've got to do something.
The railroad?
Perpetual
or-
beaver problems.
Is it the railroad or?
It's the railroad. They
Okay,
cleaned it
that's
out.
your problem then.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's going to impact us if we get a torrential rain.
Okay, well, I'll, moderator, we need to appoint a moderator for the rest of the year, as soon as Ray is gone. It also needs to be posted within 10 days of his passing, so we ought to get a post.
Request for
And,
people that are
it has
interested.
to be done in 3 places, I imagine, it's gonna be the town hall, library, and the BFPD, I would assume.
Okay.
Those 3 places gotta be done, I got that from, VLCT. We can appoint, so anybody that's interested ought to be sending in an application. I have no idea. I had a couple ideas, but my wife negated one of them, so I think I better shut up.
Will you volunteer first?
No, but I got an email from Amy Howlett saying, are you and Alan gonna run for moderator? I goes, not on your life. I don't know what you think. I mean, I guess I must be, have no time on my hands, I guess. So, just one other note, in your regard, I wish you would spend the day down there, Saturday, not a drive-through day, but park your car and walk what goes on down there for 2-3 hours. That'll give you a good handle on what's going on at our recycling center. Because we're the smallest one. Springfield is huge, Charlestown is huge, and so is Walpole. They got 5
They got
times the area
space,
we have,
yeah.
so. You know, just,
Yeah, all I'm trying to.
no, I know,
do
but I'm just
is
saying.
Create some system.
That's my only
organization.
opposition, because I see traffic issues down there when, Rich Earth, went in, we had to actually ask them to direct traffic, because they were going every which way, going the wrong way, and then you get these hot-headed drivers that aren't gonna stand for that, and, you know, we have burnouts, and, it was a circus.
Richard,
Yeah, I think she's still there. Are you still awake with us? Yeah, so, one other question on Rich Earth. I was told the other day that we have 3 heaters in that little building for heating that are they electrical?
Sorry?
The heaters, I was told that you have 3 heaters in that little shed that holds the urine for recycling.
Yeah,
They run off our electricity down there, correct?
I'm not sure about that. I'm gonna call in our program director who's here to answer some questions as well. No, there he is. Great.
Hello.
Hi.
Could you repeat the
Can you hear me?
question about the heaters for us?
Do you have the answer? Those, I was told the other day that you have 3 heaters in that building. Are they electric heaters?
There we go. Sorry, I had problems with my audio there. I caught the last part of your question about electric heaters, but I missed the prior part.
Are they in their building? I was told that you have 3 heaters in that building for the urine tank is.
Oh.
Is that correct?
We don't have 3, but there will be one submerged electric heater in the urine itself, and we use that
Okay.
kind because it's quite safe because it's in liquid.
Okay. How much juice is that going to use? That's hooked on our electricity down there. Just wondering.
No, it's a minimal amount. We use the one in Brattleboro as well, and we never actually calculated how much it used. We paid $20 a month as a blanket for all of our usage in that building, and it really, I think, never showed up as a measurable amount. But we could measure that. It would be an easy thing to measure the electric usage if you wanted.
I was just curious, when I heard there was 3 of them, that's why I was just curious.
Sure, right. Yeah, well, I'll add that the only reason we heat it is so it won't freeze, so that the tank itself won't freeze. And there's a 2-inch foam insulation on all 6 sides of the tank, so it's pretty well insulated, and we just keep it a little bit above freezing. So it's not like it's heated to the room temperature. It's just heated so it won't freeze.
Besides your grand opening, I know there's probably about 2 dozen, maybe 3 dozen people that showed up, and probably 6 or 7 that had samples to deliver or contribute. Have you had anybody show up since then? I was down there a couple times just disposing of my stuff, and I didn't see anybody down there.
I don't know how many people have used it since the opening. We don't project it to be very, very large number of like total people per day. In Brattleboro, we collect at the current depot, which has been developing its clientele for the last 8 years or so, and we get a little under 1,000 gallons per month there, in typically 5 to 10 gallons per time. So it might be 100 people per month that visit there. So you won't see a lot of traffic from it, especially because it's new in Rockingham. But yeah, if there's any concerns about number of visitors or traffic flow, we could also give you a number that's less back of the envelope than that, and more specific.
I have a question. Yeah. Go ahead. Is there any signage? It's just no one seems to know what's going on there when you drive through. There's no explanation. It's just a plain boarded structure.
Yeah, we had signage at the grand opening, and then I don't know, Julia, if you've had a chance to make that permanent yet.
I drove there last week and I must not have been paying attention, but I did look at the building and didn't see any explanation of what it was or what any kind of marketing, if you will.
Yeah, there was a short period where some of our temporary signs weren't on there, but they should be all stapled to the side of the building as of later last week. Yeah, kind of explaining the whole program and what it's doing there.
And the recycling center staff asked us specifically to state that it was only to be accessible during business hours, excluding federal holidays. So that was, and business hours being the hours of operation of the recycling center, to make sure that we wouldn't be encouraging people to come in outside of those hours. So we made sure to have that be conspicuous as well.
Okay, any other questions for the Richards? Hearing none, I guess we got you from the meeting, and I think we're going to adjourn this one because there's no need for an executive session. I can see, so I'll entertain the motion, the magic motion.
I move that we adjourn.
Do we hear a second?
A second.
Motion's made and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. We are out of here.